Hey friends, Dean here. Before we get you on to your episode, I want to take a moment to invite you to our next virtual online trivia night. Wednesday, May 13th at 8 p.m. Join us either on our Facebook group or on our YouTube page for 3 rounds of fun trivia, music questions, movie questions, general knowledge questions. It'll be a fun time and a chance to win some prizes and have just a good relaxing night of some trivia at home. You don't even have to go out for it. So don't forget, Wednesday, March 13th at 8 p.m. Join us on our Facebook group or YouTube for 3 rounds of fun virtual online trivia. We'll see you there. In this episode, our usual top 5 has had a spell cast upon it as special guest Andrew Cremines joins us around the cauldron to conjure up our top 3 horror icons. Stay with us.
Get ready for the 3324 podcast, where lifelong friends Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber share their love of all things music and movies. Dean has directed short films and is a music trivia buff, and Eric, trained in audio engineering, brings his extensive knowledge of music and film to the conversation as they discuss, debate, and celebrate their favorite albums, films, and much more.
Welcome, friends, to the 3324 podcast. Dean Legiro here behind the microphone, Eric Kuber behind another microphone, and Andrew Cremines yet behind a third and totally different microphone in a different part of the country. Welcome, friends. Thank you for joining us. This is the second full-length episode in our Spooktober Halloween celebration, and no better person than to get Andrew Cremines to join us when we're talking about Halloween and horror. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean that you're a horrible person, but when we talk about horror, there's no better person to be speaking about it with, Andrew.
Both work. It's fine. I am beyond thrilled to be here. I've got my our 3324 podcast hat atop my head.
Nice,
Very nice. I'm a fan of the show. I love the.
Did you get that on Amazon? On Amazon?
I had to. It was off of eBay for $480.
Good. I knew if I put it up for $400, someone would buy it. I knew it. It's a matter of finding the right price point.
Yeah,
and getting someone to jump in on it.
I'm stoked to be here. I love doing the Wednesday the live shows. I love the podcast, yeah. So it's cool. It's cool to be here.
Hey, and you know what? Thank you for that segue. We're on social media. On Facebook and Instagram at 3324 Podcast. We're also on Twitter at 3324P. And like Andrew said, we also do we do live shows every other week. And you know what? Let's drop the promo here. We're doing a really fun contest, or we're calling it the Monster Mash, where Eric is going to pit his evil horde of monsters against my meager pre-1970s black and white crew.
Oh,
but we're gonna do battle, and it's gonna be a lot of fun, and it's gonna be very audience participation heavy. You can win T-shirts. We're gonna be doing trivia. You'll have a chance to determine the outcome of maybe some of these matchups. So it's gonna be a great time, right, Eric?
Yeah, absolutely. Our teams. You have a formidable team.
I do, but we don't know. We don't know because we still need to draw from our team. So we've got our teams, but then we need to pick from it. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I'll tell you that. So join us every other week on Facebook or YouTube Live as we do those types of things. So here we are, top 3, because this is a first. And Andrew is a groundbreaker in our show because he was our very first guest host.
Yeah.
Now he's the very first guest to come on for a top 5. Well, we have to chop it down to a top 3. And he has the distinction of being the second or the first host to return second time.
So what are we doing here? 5-timers club? Is Andrew
going to
have
to do it like SNL. Steve Martin and Chevy Chase and,
Nice.
After the 5th one, you get the bathrobe.
Well, it's my honor to be here. And I wanted to say before we start, a happy belated birthday to 50% of the podcast, Eric Kuber.
Thank you.
I hope you had a great birthday. Did you do anything cool, movie or music related?
I did, actually. I saw No Time to Die, which
nice.
I enjoyed very much, actually.
A very appropriate title to see on your birthday.
Yeah, well, it was a very satisfying ending to Daniel Craig's run. I'll give it.
Excellent.
I'll say that much. So,
cool. And that's officially this is his official closeout as Bond.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Onwards and upwards for the Bond franchise. Nothing's going to stop it, and nothing should. So just keep rolling with it. We got some work to do here. we're going to do the top 3 horror icons, and that's a pretty broad subject.
Spectrum.
Usually we're very kind of narrow, or we choose a subject and then we put even more guardrails into it to really test ourselves. But for this one, it's kind of like, let's just open it up to whatever, right? A horror icon can really be anything, and it's very subjective. So it could be a person, it could be a place, it could be a location, it could be a film, it could be a character. It could be a black cat, if you think that's something that's iconic in horror. So it really lends itself to a lot of openness. And we'll see how we do. It's going to be a top 3. So we're going to go through it with each one of us.
Are you actually suggesting that there are no rules to this, Dean?
No rules
whatsoever.
Not only did I Jedi mind trick suggest it, but I flat out said it as well. So you didn't even see me wave my hand and say there are no rules. There are no rules.
Rules that I'm always breaking.
These are not the DVDs you're looking for. So yes, no, we're doing it like Applebee's. No rules, just right.
There you go.
We're opening up and we're just gonna have fun with it. So let's get cracking with it. It's pretty self-explanatory. So Eric, why don't you start us off? We'll do we'll put the guest in between. Okay. To make them feel uncomfortable. This way we could throw some kind of elbows at them from both sides, and
there you go.
Kind of nudge them and kind of give it to them a little bit. So Eric, why don't you start off with your number 3?
Okay, my number 3
top horror icon.
Okay, I love a great ghost story. I've always been, as a kid, that was probably my biggest horror. If I had to choose, any type of horror subgenre within the the horror genre, it's a good ghost story, and I don't think there's anything more iconic than the original Haunting of Hill House. The novel is huge in a lot of circles, written by Shirley Jackson, and but the original 1963 film adaptation, directed by Robert Wise, I thought was very, very well done, very effective. I never read the book per se, but from what I understand, I think the movie was a very faithful adaptation to it. It's just, just the iconic. It doesn't rely on a lot of visual stimulation in that kind of, well, actually it kind of does, because of the way the camera angles are in the film. It's black and white. It's moody. It sets the tone. It relies more, I think, on the sound effects. I think that's what really gets you in this thing. It's the creepy factor of that and the psychological aspect that it has on the main character. Now, Netflix did a really wonderful job. Mike Flanagan, modern filmmaker, horror filmmaker, did a wonderful job adapting that story and kind of stretching it out to be sort of a family drama / horror ghost story with a lot more, visual aspects, more effects driven, but very, very well done. So I highly recommend that to anybody who's never seen it. But the original film, I if you guys haven't seen it, I would really recommend you guys check it out, because it still holds up to this day.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, so it's something I'm going to put on my list.
And it's been made again, and I think in the 90s they did one with Liam Neeson, which was horrible.
Yeah, Catherine. Was that with Catherine Zeta-Jones?
Yes, it was absolutely horrible.
That's who I'm going to remember her, not Liam Neeson.
Right.
Liam Neeson.
Yeah, Mike Flanagan took liberties and he expanded on the original cast, or the characters in the story, which are there's only 4 main characters. The main character being Nell, who was one of the sisters in the new version, but it's sort of like the house takes her and she's one with the house, and it's a very psychological sort of psychic connection going on there. It's really creepy. It's really effective. And it's been widely praised by a lot of great filmmakers. Stephen King cites it as one of his books. I think he used it as an inspiration for Salem's Lot, for the Marston House in his book, Salem's Lot. He even did an adaptation himself of called Rose Red, which he wrote the teleplay for, and he did there was a mini series about that, and it was kind of a loose adaptation of Hill House. So it's out there. I think it's the most iconic ghost story. There are other great films out there, but I think this is probably the finest. So that's awesome. Number 3.
The Mike Flanagan version on Netflix, to me, is one of the best horror things in the last decade for me, and we watch it once a year. It's been out 2 or 3 years. We watched it 3 times, and just the a good horror movie is taking just a story about somebody doing something, but then adding as a second, like a separate element that is affecting the characters, not just going out and making a horror movie. It's the Mike Flanagan, which I think he's here to save horror, in my opinion. Like his stuff, like Haunting of Bly Manor and Midnight Mass. I just think he did Dr. Sleep, the Stephen King adaptation. I think that it's a family story of people that it's just a group of people that are dealing with alcoholism and drug addiction and all of this stuff going on. But at the same time, something horrible happened at a haunted house at some point. So it's two things coming together. I just think it's so great. It's a great pick. And I think that the more modern version, we just watched the Liam Neeson version last year. And it's very 90s.
Very 90s. That I remember the house being like really, really bizarre. I mean, it's like they built this set, and it's like a torture chamber. Like every room is like spiky and weird, and it's like they really went with that aesthetic of making the house. And it is described that way in the from what I understand in the book and in the original version of the film, that the house is sort of like kind of designed in a weird way. But in this version, it's like it's really out there, and it's just weird. It's just, I don't know. It was horrible. It's absolutely terrible. The
epitome of 90s remakes.
If you get a chance, look at there's a YouTube clip of all of the hidden ghosts in the Flanagan version that you didn't catch, and just watching that kind of freaks you out, because they'll walk by and there'll be one hiding behind a piano or something, and you're like, ugh, so good. I love it so much.
You'll be surprised, Andy, how close you'll see all the elements that Flanagan, but he kind of spread them out in his version, but they're all there in the original version. I mean, there's elements to, even the statues that you see in all over the house, they're there. These creepy close-ups of the camera, like, and that kind of stuff going on. And you'll instantly recognize it, and I think cool. So yeah.
Awesome. So Eric's number 3, The Haunting.
That's right.
Cool. All right, Andy, before we get to your number 3, you've got some exciting news recently having to do with you and a little small primate that runs around with a guy in a particular colored hat. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
There's 3 or 4 stories that are similar to that going on right now, but I'll pick the one that. No, I'm kidding. I did a lot of character concept design for Curious George movie that just dropped on Peacock, the streaming channel, the NBC Universal streaming channel. And pre-COVID, I was doing a lot of concept design and stuff for Universal and stuff for like Harry Potter. They have a new park coming out called Epic Universe. It's going to be, I think they just recently broke ground. It's going to be the 3rd Universal park in Orlando. And I was doing some stuff for that, but through another connection, I got to do some stuff for Universal for Curious George. So I got to design some characters, and 2 of the characters, one of them was voiced by Rita Moreno, which is awesome. And it's really cool because the whole movie was done, like not the whole movie, maybe 70% of the movie was done remotely during the pandemic. The movie almost got shelved, and then they realized how much they had done. So they said, well, we'll lose money if we don't just finish it. So they finished it, remotely, and to do an animated feature remotely is just unheard of. And it turned out really nice. And I was really happy with, I was just a tiny cog, and, there's hundreds and hundreds of people working on this stuff. But to be one of the characters, her name is Gwen. She owns a bookstore in the movie. My design is like spot on for how it ended up in the movie. So I was just so stoked. But yeah, man, that was really, really fun. It was really cool to be part of that. And I love being part of anything to do with educational stuff because, Jim Henson is my hero. Like I've got that contradiction going on where I'm just a huge horror movie fan that loves all of this stuff or whatever, but I also like to do the more educational stuff because, like Jim Henson was the man. He's in my top trinity of creative influences. And, he wasn't afraid to scare kids either.
Yeah,
if you look at
absolutely.
He was.
It's pretty awesome. It's when you had posted that and you had posted a screenshot of your name in the credits. I'm like, oh man, that is just totally awesome. So congratulations and well done. Before Eric jumps in, I have a pop quiz, Andy.
Oh boy.
Does Curious George have a tail? Answer in 3, 2, 1. What's
No.
your answer? You're
no,
correct.
he does not. Yeah.
He is a victim of what's called the Mandela effect, where people think that they've seen pictures of him with a tail, but Curious George, in fact, does not have a tail. So
It's
you
extra
get to,
gross that he doesn't have one. He should. He's a
Well,
monkey.
it's kind of strange, yeah.
I've
But
known
congratulations on that.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, man. I
absolutely.
really
I've known
appreciate
Andy a long time, and for you folks, he's a fantastic artist, and he does have a website. It's Andrew Cremines art.com.
It's andrewcremines.com, but it's Andrew Cremines art, all one word, is my Instagram, and that's got that's
on IG.
I keep that more updated. It's just easier to throw something on there than
I'm still waiting for my tattoo design, by the way.
Of Curious George.
Maybe the man with the yellow hat.
He wants a Gwen tattoo. So
yeah, awesome.
Good. All right. So let's jump you into the conversation here. So we're talking about your number 3.
Well,
top horror icon.
I am a huge horror movie fan, and I have been my whole life. And I'm going to come in hot here because this is a really hard exercise for me, because it's like asking a mathematician what his favorite numbers to add with are, or something like that. So like I've been trying to figure out what to do, but I'm going to start with the most famous religious leader of our time, Reverend Billy Graham, once said, "The devil lives in every frame of this movie." Quote, "Demons live in the actual celluloid of the film." The Exorcist, I think, is, to me, the most effective horror movie of all time. And the reason I think it is the most effective is that kind of what I was alluding to earlier. The reason it works so potently for me is that at its core, it's a proper film. Like it's a film. It doesn't feel like anybody sat out with the mission statement, let's go make a horror movie, or let's go try to scare people. It's like, it feels like at its core, it's just a drama about a priest with a crisis of faith, and an actress with a daughter who are both going through something very horrific, which could be, demonic possession is pretty dramatic, but I just feel like it's a proper Oscar-worthy film. Like it feels like a film, and I keep saying film over and over again, but I mean, like, it's not some throwaway VHS direct-to-video thing in the 80s. This is like, it feels like a proper film. And when it came out, ambulances were being called because people kept fainting and having heart issues during the film. And there's actually montage videos on YouTube of exit interviews in 1973 of people walking out of the movies with just dazed and shook up. They don't know what to say. Nobody had seen anything like that. They're like, I don't know what to say. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that. They're just out of it. And it's just the whole movie too. It's like an attack of the senses as well. It's like the way he directed the movie. It's absolute noise and chaos, and then smash cut to total silence. Mm-hmm. It's like zip, and you're just uneasy because you don't know how to. There's no like cool off. It's like it's on and it's off, and it keeps you uneasy the whole movie. And they even mixed the sound of bees into the movie at the very beginning. The whole first shot of the movie has got these bees in it, just to kick up your fight or flight, in your body, because you don't know what to do. You're just so off kilter, and man, the acting,
very unsettling. Yeah,
the acting.
I was going to drop a dad joke in there and say, does that make it a B movie?
Where's
my cricket sound effect? Where did it go?
Where's Jerry Seinfeld?
The acting in this movie is just unparalleled, and like there's certain parts of the movie where like the mom and Reagan are just kind of like, she's tickling her, they're just talking in bed, like, how was your day, that sort of stuff. It feels like you're kind of intruding. Like it feels so real. Like the acting is so good.
Yeah.
And Father Karras, and they even one of the main actors in the movie is an actual priest. Father Karras's Father Karras's friend, that he's like his roommate, whatever. It was an actual priest that they brought in. Man, what an incredible movie. By far top horror movie for me.
This was the movie I kept at arm's length ever since I was a kid. My mom tried to make me watch it for some strange reason. She's a sadist. She got me watching Psycho at a very early age, which freaked me out, that kind of thing. But this, whenever it came on TV, she would be, "Oh, Eric, I'm like, no. I saw like scenes, just
get it away.
Just the scene alone where Reagan's lying in bed and the priest is sitting there and the drawers opening up and he's like, "Did you do that?" And she's like, I'm like, no, I'm done, And it wasn't until I think it was in my 30s that I actually saw the film in its entirety, uncut. And I thank Andy and his lovely wife, Courtney, for that, because we all went to the movies together to see another film, and the other film was horrible. So to salvage the evening, I think we snuck into a later showing of The Exorcist. They were doing I guess a tribute to old Warner Brothers films that week at the theater, and we snuck, and that was the very first time I saw it. I don't think I admitted that to you, Andy, at the time. I don't think you knew.
You didn't show it.
So Eric played it off pretty smoothly. He played it off.
Now it's in my top 10 favorite films of all time. It's like you say, it is a film proper. And what's so amazing about it is, like you mentioned, the realism of it and the surrealism of when the effects kick in. And this is the stuff that people watch it today and they're like, "Oh, it wasn't scary at all." But I don't know, man. It's still very effective for me because of that, the way it's made. And it's just, and because it's so ridiculous and so loud and so not like the rest of the film, that's what makes it great. It's those surreal moments that you can't believe what you're watching. It's so crazy. So yeah, it's
absolutely.
Yep.
It's interesting to me also that the faith leaders of the time, like the Billy Grahams and stuff, were just so anti this movie, when I think there is not a better commercial for Catholicism on the planet than this movie. Like, they are the superheroes of the movie.
Yeah, Max von Sydow he's a badass. He comes in, he's like, he's like the man, like, he's like the Obi-Wan of this film. Like, right? He comes in and he just like,
and there's certain things, there's certain things obviously that are kind of disgusting, and things that are done with a crucifix that probably shouldn't have happened and stuff like that. But like, it's showing you how bad this can get. Like, it's, you of course you don't want to show that to like a bunch of kids in, Sunday school, but like you want to know what you're up against, and it's like, he's willing to go this far to a little girl. We need to know how badly he needs to leave. So we want Reagan to come back. So I love it so much.
Yeah. Great choice. And you know what? We put all these rules on our top fives, with Eric, and he tries to kind of push out of the rules a little bit, and always, we kind of talk about overlap a lot. We never really overlap. So what do we do on this show? We reduce it to 3. We open up the subject matter to almost anything. And guess what? My number 3 horror icon is The Exorcist as well. So well done. Well done, Andy. We are simpatico. And you pretty much said everything there was to say. A couple extra things. Nominated for 10 Academy Awards.
Holy crap.
Okay, so when you talk about the impact and what you were saying about this as a film proper, well, that if you're looking for validation, 10 Academy Award nominations will give that to you. That kind of tells you how serious this movie was being taken at the time, when there was all that schlocky, especially in the 70s, the exploitation horror, and you're coming out of the 60s with the Corman stuff that was really just slapdash and low budget. And like you said, along comes this film. And I think what makes it even more unsettling is that this is happening to a child. So that's part of the off-putting thing too, is you've got, if it was happening to a guy, you're probably, all right, whatever. But like you said, there's the relationships, there's the mother-daughter relationship, and then this stuff starts happening to her in this kind of way. So that adds another layer to the onion of this just being really unsettling. If it was happening to an adult, it might not even be as effective. Well, okay, you got the devil. But when it's happening to this child and they're battling, and then you see the other side when the demon or the devil kind of comes out, it's jarring. Like you said, it's very bracing. And then she just kind of, is this little kid. I remember at the time you talked about the audience reactions and stuff. I mean, people were terrified. I remember when this movie was out. I was a kid. Let's just go, keep it there. But It was the precursor to the Jaws effect, right? We talked about when we did our Jaws episode, how people were afraid to go in the water. Even if you didn't see the film, you had heard about how frightening this was. And it caused a literal panic. And Exorcist was like the first precursor to that. People didn't want to see it. I think I saw it when I was relatively young, or parts of it. And I think it might even have been on TV, and they probably cut a ton out. And I was still trepidatious about it, getting nauseous during certain scenes, just with the anxiety of being a really young kid.
That's right.
Watching it as well. And after you'd heard all that stuff. So Andy, you hit the nail on the head with it being an actual film based with a story. And then, you put it brilliantly. Then these other things happen, these external stressors that invade the story. At the heart, it's about a mother and daughter, but then this other stuff happens to them. Mm-hmm. So.
Well, I mean, around that time, there was a lot of the grindhouse stuff going on. Like people were bleeding like bright red paint, and like everything was just kind of stupid looking.
Benjamin Moore was making a ton of money in Hollywood providing red paint.
And then then this movie kind of comes along, and it's just like, whoa, this is not, this is leaps and bounds. Even other demon possessed movies around the time, like Rosemary's Baby, which is huge, is still cheesy. It's still got weird kind of cheese. I mean, it's just overacted and kind of, it's still good. I mean, it's still a classic, but I mean, it's not The Exorcist. It's just night and day to me.
That movie is, I think a little bit of that movie was played for laughs too. It was a black comedy to a certain extent. And until the end, when you find everything out, but up till then, it's the eccentric nature of all the neighbors in that movie that really, put you off. And it was just like, what the hell's going on here?
Weird. So just a weird scene that was going on. So cool. All right. There's our number 3. Eric, why don't you uncork your number 2 horror icon? Now you did a movie.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got, what do we have out there? We've got real people, we've got fictional characters, we've got locations. What do you have for number 2?
Well, my number 2 is a real person.
Okay.
And that is Stephen King, who is by far I would say the auteur, the go-to guy for contemporary horror fiction. It's just oh God, I mean, how many books now has he written? But I prefer his earlier work.
63.
Yeah.
This year.
I think just in the 2000s.
I was a late bloomer with Stephen King. I didn't really get into his stuff until probably it was around. Well, it was the late 70s, I have to say, because I watched the TV adaptation of Salem's Lot, which is probably my favorite novel, and it's only his second novel. So I know he's written better books. I know his writing has gotten improved over the years and that kind of thing. But that story to me really sits. It's forever ingrained in my head as being the absolute creepiest vampire story. He just has a way of, and I think we all agree on this. I think we've mentioned it, in conversation before, collectively or by ourselves. But it's just been the thing that's off-putting about Stephen King is how descriptive he is in his characters and how backstories flow, and there's newspaper articles about what happened in the town, and really going into that
in the
detail.
1800s. This town was on the river, banks of the river, and he's like, he gives you like a travel log almost,
right? And then he'll even write
the areas, villages.
And he'll even write, like in the case of Salem's Lot, he wrote a short story which was in one of his collections, and earlier, the book came later, but it was sort of a prequel to the story because the town itself has already been tainted by witchcraft, so it's already, the vampire comes to this town because of its checkered past, and it's the blood has run red there already. And there's actually a show I think called Chapelwaite out there right now, which is a loose adaptation of that story called Jerusalem's Lot. That's the official name of the town. But I mean, like, I've gotten into a lot of his, like, really sunk my teeth into, like, It and The Stand, and Shining.
I see what you did there. Sunk your teeth into It. Come on.
Yeah. Well. And so, I'm actually impressed with myself because I'm not an avid reader. I used to be, but not lately. But back then I was really reading. It took me, quite a while to get through them. But yeah, I prefer like his earlier work, like that first couple of decades of stuff. Now I really couldn't say what his work is like 90s on. I think it's like sort of like I've read a few things, but I'm not really up on what he's
I think pound for pound, right? So there are a lot of prolific authors. I don't know that there's an author that's this prolific that writes books that thick, like with so many pages. Like you could be very prolific and knock out 200-page novels and be perfectly good, or 300, but
right,
the stuff that he's writing is so intense, in depth, and researched and prolific. So not only is he knocking these things out, but these are like epic sized novels as well.
Yeah, he'll write like a 600-page book, and then the next project will be like something like The Green Mile, which was like split up into like 6 books, like it's like novellas, and they left you hanging on each thing, like really great stuff like that. He really has the imagination to kind of not only write the book itself, but just kind of split it up or make short stories, or it's and not everything is horror either. It's he's written plenty of stories that are just straight up dramas or human dramas. I think of Different Seasons, which is one of my favorite books. 2 of the stories out of that were great films, probably 2 of the best movies ever made, especially an adaptation of his work, which was Shawshank Redemption, and Stand By Me, which was The Body. And then the other 2 stories, I think we covered this on the live show about books becoming movies, but the other 2 stories were not great adaptations, but the stories were better than the movies. In this case, I think the movies were better than those 2 stories. So not all the time is he, and he'll even admit that. Like if somebody comes along and does an adaptation and they'll do it better, he'll give them all the props in the world.
His stuff is definitely hit and miss. As prolific as he is, there's a lot of material to be mined, and you get different types of directors, different types of budgets. I don't know how picky he is with, protecting his work. And it seems like if you've got the money, you can buy the rights to it and he'll let you adapt it. So you see some varying degrees of success where you get something like The Shining, which really didn't resemble much from what the intent was, but is heralded as a classic on its own because it's a Kubrick film, right? And it's more known as a Kubrick film than it is as a King book at this point because of what Kubrick did to it. So,
and you don't,
the guy
you don't mess with Kubrick.
and Stephen King can apparently just write for days. I mean, ideas just kind of flow.
Well, I just to go back to what you were saying, you haven't really read anything past the 90s. My wife Courtney and I have been listening to his audiobooks for probably the last 2 years when we go on road trips to Orlando or wherever. So we've gone through probably 15 or 16 of his books in the last 2 or 3 years. And I think Stephen King modernized horror. I think that in a global sense, I think modern horror storytelling owes a huge amount to Stephen King. Like without King, there wouldn't be Stranger Things, there wouldn't be Midnight Mass, it wouldn't be. You get so. The cool thing about him though is you get so lost and invested in his characters that it doesn't matter where you go with it, because where the story goes, because like he can't end a book sometimes. Like he is all about the journey. Like the journey is. But the thing is like you're getting to know this one character that you're really invested. Like I want to see what happens to this guy. I don't really care how the book ends. I just want to know what happens to him. And so once you get kind of invested into that, you're kind of all in. I mean, he has some really crazy premises sometimes, especially in the Richard Bachman years, whatever. But before him, we had like H.P. Lovecraft, which was really poetic and deep, with deep time and large scaled universe type horror, but like it was very impersonal. And then you had like Mary Shelley and Victor Hugo and Poe sometimes that were iconic, super iconic stories, but they were a little bit outside our time and they were very poetic. They weren't visceral. They weren't like, I don't know. King kind of invented that small town horror thing where like the real monsters are the people, not the monsters.
Right.
So
it's very relatable. Yeah.
You're more scared. You're more scared of like the sheriff than you are the werewolf, you know? So it's, I don't know. He's incredible. I love Stephen King. He's, you know, even stuff like The Dead Zone. I mean, like he can just do drama. He doesn't have to do horror, you know?
Yeah. And he's done some pulpy mystery novels as well.
Yeah.
So he's known for the horror, but he takes a breather every so often and resets and will write something like Rita Hayworth in The Shawshank Redemption, which gets adapted. And like we had said, I think we were talking about it on the live show, is that's another one. If you had put Stephen King's Shawshank Redemption, people would immediately think as a movie that it was a horror film. And that's and that movie is a case where you probably don't want Stephen King's name on it because it would come with a lot of preconceived notions because of his iconic status as a horror writer, that it also can kind of so when he tries to do something not horror, you kind of need to be careful. You kind of need to take his name off of it because you don't want that. In this case, you don't want the brand awareness of Stephen King. You don't want those, there's going to be a horror film, I'm not going to go see it, I don't like horror. And meanwhile, Shawshank is this magical film which owes nothing except for to the horrors of prison life. So awesome choice.
He wrote a pulp novel that you'd like, Eric, called Joyland. It's just a straight up kind of pulp thing, and it's a small novel, really good. I recommend it. But also, just one last thing, you guys know I'm a huge metalhead, and two of the most iconic metal albums of all time, Ride the Lightning and Ride the Lightning from Metallica and Among the Living from Anthrax, are both named after The Stand from parts of The Stand. So Ride the Lightning was like just a drop quote about being electrocuted in the electric chair or whatever. And Among the Living, they wrote an actual song about the walking dude in The Stand. So
that's cool.
There's actually a lot of Anthrax songs that are after
he's built I mean, let's face it, I mean, he's built his own universe. I mean, he is well within this bubble of his own, you know, work, and he's got such a broad body of work that he'll even like combine characters. And like I know in the Dark Tower series, which is this fantasy thing, I only read the first 3 of the series, but from what I understand, characters from his other books are in this world. Like for example, once again, Salem's Lot, Father Callahan, the priest in the story, appears in the Dark Tower series because he crossed the dimension into that other world. So he does that from time to time. Characters will pop up, you know, which is ironic because I mean, there's this show at Castle Rock now where they're taking characters from the Stephen King universe and placing them together or piecing little bits and pieces of the stories.
He's got enough there. He's got enough of a catalog of characters.
And doing these really cleverly made episodes about they're not the actual story, but they're elements of the story, like sort of like, you know, mashed up. Which is kind of neat, you know? So
awesome. Number 2, iconic, a real person.
Excellent choice.
King. All right, Andy, number 2 for your most iconic horror icons.
This is really hard for me, and it was a tie, but I'm gonna stick with one just so I keep it going here. But my number 2 is Wes Craven. Wes Craven, the director, and the reason be this: the dude flipped horror on its head, like in 3 decades, like 10 different times. He doesn't get enough credit for keeping horror fresh over 30 or 40 years. Like he kind of brought a little bit of legitimacy toward the grindhouse kind of movies in the 70s, like Last House on the Left and those kind of movies, whatever. And then where he really starts to shine, though, is like he invents Nightmare on Elm Street in the early 80s, which single-handedly made New Line Cinema a legitimate movie studio that they were about to declare bankruptcy, and it was the house, they call it the house that Freddie built. It was about to go bankrupt. That movie does really well, and it goes back up, and they go on to make, of course, The Lord of the Rings and the It remake and all that stuff. New Line was a huge studio now. So like he brings around New Line Cinema, and then in the mid-'80s, Craven reinvents Nightmare on Elm Street again in a new way with Frank Darabont, Shawshank, right? In 1987 with Part 3, Dream Warriors, which made Freddy one of the biggest icons of the 80s, that movie. Like he was toys, costumes, like there was even like rap albums about Freddy around that time, around 1987. And then our boy...
And he even had his own TV show at the time, right?
Yeah,
Freddy's Nightmares. Was that after that? Or
yeah, Freddy's Nightmares. That was around 88, 89. Then Craven, our boy Craven, comes back in the 90s and reinvents completely flips horror on its head in the 90s with the aid of Kevin Williamson with the Scream franchise, where he took the old horror tropes and used them against themselves, pointing out all the rules of a horror movie in a horror movie, which nobody had really done that before, that kind of postmodernism sort of thing. And it was actually really ballsy to do that, because once you expose all the tropes and pitfalls of a genre, you run the risk of every movie from that point on being a joke. So like, he had to somehow make this work without ruining horror, like, or just to keep it fresh and stuff. Then he comes back and reinvents Nightmare on Elm Street again to make the actors of the movie franchise, Robert Englund, Heather Langenkamp, and Wes Craven, in Wes Craven's New Nightmare. He even stars in it as himself, and all the characters star at it as themselves, and they're haunted by the characters in the franchise, which is this close to being cheesy. Like, it's so close to being a total cheeseball movie, but it still gets pulled off, and it's great. And then Scream 2 comes around, with Kevin Williamson again, reinvents the horror sequel by playing all the horror tropes of horror sequels. He was just an absolute madman of horror. Like, he just kept reinvigorating the franchise over and over again. He's got some random fantastic one-off movies like Serpent and the Rainbow also, which are great, but I just love him so much. And Freddy Krueger was my gateway into horror. It was the Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors was the first horror movie I saw in the theater. And I was just obsessed with Freddy. I've been obsessed with Freddy ever since. I just love it. I love Wes Craven. I appreciate him doing that, because I've been a horror freak ever since. So Wes Craven's my boy.
Cool. First off, who's got a better horror name than Wes Craven? It's like, that's like a name built for like the horror industry. It's like, okay, you've got it right there. And that's his real name too, as well. A couple of things you said, which the big thing was the Scream franchise, and you hit the nail on the head there. There's that fine line where it's kind of Scooby-Doo-ish, and they're trying to like figure things out. And I think by acknowledging all the things that people have made fun of in horror films, like when the person will run and they'll trip and then they can't run anymore, and like get up, and all those things that they kind of address in Scream, it made it a little more real, because that's the way the audience was thinking about these films when they watch them, is, it's always the virgin that doesn't get killed and she lives, and all these things. So by weaving it into a film, and not just making it about that, but actually putting that real horror layer on top of it. So there was the wink wink self-awareness level, but then taking it wasn't parody like they would do with Scary Movie, right? Where it took that and like really gave it the airplane treatment. So they were, again, it's about treating the material seriously or with respect, and then having actors and talent that's going to treat it with respect too, and not over the top it and overact it, and really sell it. And that's why it worked, because it took itself seriously, even though it was, there was a little fourth wall breaking about acknowledging those things, but it was what people were doing anyway at the time with all these horror films.
Yeah. And then they cast Drew Barrymore, put her gigantic mug in the center of the poster, the biggest star of the show, and then they kill her in the first 10 minutes, which hadn't been done since Hitchcock, or just that bait and switch. So you're like, holy crap, if she's dead, nobody's safe. You know, and
that's right.
Great stuff, man. I love the Scream. Oh, also, the Scream 4, I think it came out in the 2000s, kind of parodied, like, I don't know if I don't want to ruin anything basically, but it goes into like everybody on social media having to record everything. You're part of the movie now. So it's like, it even flips it again. So like the Scream franchise keeps getting fresh and fresh and fresh. So like, I think 3 was probably the worst one, but 4 was really fresh and new. I thought that was really neat.
And they're revisiting it too, aren't they?
Yeah.
Aren't they going
First
for another
cast?
Another dip into the well. So yeah, no, that's a great. And he's been around like 1972, I think, was Last House on the Left or somewhere around there. So very prolific career, not only directing, but then there's the whole like Wes Craven Presents.
Yeah.
Right. So stuff that he put his name on as well. Not only the stuff that he directed, but also he became his own industry of kind of like a Stephen King, where if you saw Stephen King's name above the title, you knew what were, it's something from Stephen King. So Wes Craven kind of had that clout in the industry of Wes Craven Presents, or this, even though he wasn't directing it, he was kind of like, here's something to see. So pretty neat.
Yeah, I think he was a little loosey goosey with that because the Wes Craven's Wishmaster was the only movie I've ever walked out of the theater in my entire life. Like I could not sit through it. I refused to waste my life with this movie. So I was only, so I think that was, I just pretend he didn't do that or have anything to do with it.
Excellent choice. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Great choice. Yep.
I see a pattern developing because all three of us, our number 3 was a film. And so far for our number 2 has been real people. And we did not consult with our lists. We didn't trade our lists beforehand, and we didn't talk about the order. And again, because it was so broad, but I'm going to fall in lockstep with you guys. And my number 2 is a real person, mentioned by Andy when he was talking about authors and people from the past. And it is Edgar Allan Poe. Born in 1809, died in 1849. He was only 40 years old. Rough life. If you go on Wikipedia or you look at pictures of the guy, I mean, he didn't, for a 40-year-old guy, he did not look well anyway, but he just had a lot of just issues, mysterious circumstances around his death, substance abuse, all kinds of things. But really the pioneer or the godfather of Gothic horror. Yeah. I think,
absolutely.
And like Andy had said, a lot of it is poetry. So it's word imagery in that respect, short stories. How I came to interact with Poe was through the cheesy Roger Corman films, right? Because in the 60s, I mean, Roger Corman, for some reason, just grabbed all this Poe material, and some of it was in name only. For instance, one of my favorite like horror films of all time actually is The Raven. And it is so corny, but I love it because I saw it when I was really young, and it had those fantastic, elements to it when they're dueling with Boris Karloff and Vincent Price, but that had nothing to do with the poem itself.
Yeah.
But being exposed to those things and Murders in the Rue Morgue, Pit and the Pendulum, all these Tomb of Ligeia, all these films that Corman was making in the 60s, just kind of mining all the Poe material. And again, faithful or not, he was able to expose people to at least who he was and go further into the material. And then there was some short stories I remember reading. And it's funny because in Eric, when we're talking about our TV shows, Eric was talking about Miami Vice.
Yeah.
And he talked about one episode where they bricked up this serial killer, and they caught him and they bricked him up. And that is basically a rewrite of Cask of Amontillado, which is a short story about a guy taking vengeance where he bricks up his rival behind a brick wall, like chains him up and then builds a brick wall. So his presence and influences felt far and wide. And then the whole Gothic section of fashion and people that are into that, I think Poe just falls right into that, he was just unfortunately a tortured life, a tortured soul.
Yeah, he had a lot of psychological
but it's on there
problems.
on the page. It's on the page.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Were the Corman movies, were they for Hammer? Were those Hammer movies?
I don't. They might have been Universal. Was it UIP or whatever? Universal International Pictures. I think
they
were
UIP.
Definitely
British. I think they were. I don't know if they were British made or I don't know.
I don't think they were Hammer. I think they were Universal, like Samuel Zarkov. I think it was like Universal International or something like that. So they were. I mean, they were cranking these things out. Probably, I guarantee you. They probably reused the same sets. I'm sure they reused stock footage of castles. I guarantee you, because a lot of it was just, and they were just getting Vincent Price just to do all this stuff. He would go from one to the other.
They made Vincent Price a household name with these films.
Yeah, that's where really he made his bones with becoming a horror icon. Because before that, he was kind of, for the most part, a dramatic actor. But then in the 60s.
I love the look of the movies, the Corman Poe movies, but also the Hammer movies. It just especially like Mask of the Red Death, just the Technicolor, it's a gray castle, but with these really bright color outfits and stuff like that. I love that feel of those movies. But,
the color, like you say, the Technicolor. I think I just watched one of the Draculas the other day, and it had a very weird sort of almost a psychedelic approach to the cinematography. It was kind of like that weird yellow, and it was almost like every shot was framed in a sort of an oval. And on the outside of you see like all these weird like yellow and orange colors, like it's very psychedelic looking. And So it gave it that added effect. Yeah, gave it that added effect. So I thought that was kind of, interesting.
On Poe specifically, I think there's a point where every kid in high school finds his, like, you just find the book and you just start reading it and you're like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. But like he just, it's very poetic, and by today's standards, he's like the precursor Tim Burton, of the time. But like, at the time though, you got to imagine the pearl clutching that was happening, people reading these poems, because nobody was doing that. And he's talking about dead bodies under the ground, under the floorboards and stuff like, like just the whole idea of that, I could just imagine how many people just were throwing fits about it. And I from what I understand, he wasn't a hero in his hometown during his life. It wasn't until later on that people kind of caught on. But his stuff, like Eric, you were telling me a while ago that you went to the Poe Museum.
Yeah, it's in Virginia. There's a Poe, Edgar Allan Poe museum. It's like it's actually the oldest house in this town in Virginia, and they turned it into a Poe museum. So they have actual artifacts from his life, his bed, his writing utensils, books. He even wrote a couple of sci-fi books. He had dabbled in that, and
really?
Poems. You actually see the ink pens and the feathers and stuff that he drank out of, whiskey bottles and things like that he was taking a lot of drugs, and so very, like Dean said, a very tortured soul, where he had a lot of psychological problems, and a lot of tragedy in his life.
Yeah.
So, it's unfortunate, but he very talented, a genius, really. I mean,
Yep.
So
and there you have it. My number 2.
Bringing it back around, last week it was just announced that Mike Flanagan, who did House of Haunting of Hill House and all the things we've been talking about, is now doing the Fall of the House of Usher for Netflix, based on Poe's work.
Perfect.
Keep mining it. Keep mining that public domain stuff.
Yeah.
It's free. All right, are we ready? Are we ready for number ones?
Yeah, I think.
All right, before we get to number ones, let's do a little plugging here. Andrew Cremines Art on Instagram. If you want to see some amazing artwork, he's got a classic style, but then he also makes it his own, and the stuff he does is just absolutely amazing. And hit him up on Instagram. Just give him a follow. Andrew Cremines Art. We'll put a link in the show notes as well. See what he's doing there. Go to the website, but you know what? It's easier just to do it on the socials and check him out on Instagram. So
thanks, man.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Good stuff. He's a really talented artist. So please go check out his stuff. All right, Eric, number 1. So far we've done a movie. We've done a person. Okay.
So my number 1.
So what do you have?
My favorite. I don't know. It's safe to say it's pretty iconic at this point, but, so my favorite creature, favorite monster, favorite, thing in the dark, so to speak. I'm a huge fan, not only of horror, but sci-fi. And the design of this thing was by far one of the most genius things in my life that I've ever experienced, watching, even looking at. It's the coolest thing. The artwork of the artist, H.R. Giger, was just amazing. And that is the creature from Alien, the Ridley Scott film. And oh my God, this thing is just biomechanical. It is bizarre. It's sexy. It's creepy looking. I wouldn't want to see this thing standing in my corner in the closet, hovering, like it just as it does in the film. And my goodness, I mean, just, the design of this thing alone is just, it's breathtaking. As a horror fan, as a sci-fi geek, this is the stuff you eat up. This is absolute gold when you look at it. And Ridley Scott, being an artist himself, looked at this thing and decided, I want this to be the creature in this movie, which was supposed to be more or less a B type film. It was kind of written that way. And he kind of elevated to that status by bringing in this artist, of E. Giger's work. And not only that, but just picking that original design that he had done already. It was already there. It was already on the page. And he's like, I want this. And Giger's like, oh, I can design you a brand new creature. And he's like, no, you don't understand. I want this.
That one.
This is what I want. This is elegant. This is beautiful. This is what we're doing. And so, but he brought Giger on board to work on the film, to help, in the production design of it. The scene with the thing in the big, when they enter the ship, there's like the space jockey, the giant, skeletoid thing that's sitting in what looks like a chair of some sort, but this very sort of sphincter-like object growing out of it, again, giving it that erotic flair. Don't know what it is, what it's supposed to be, but taking that one scene alone elevated the movie to an A movie.
Yeah, it gives it history.
Because of that budget, because of that extra, and it looks so epic and so big that it was the coolest thing. And it's just, and nothing's happening in the scene. It's just people walking around this chair, and but because it looks so, it's like unlike anything anybody had ever seen before. It's
monolithic in size and in scale, and it just kind of, and the funny thing about Alien or the Xenomorph is, like, Alien came out in 1979, and the movie kind of came and went.
Yeah,
it didn't get a sequel until 86. I mean, no one really thought, like, hey, let's revisit this thing, right? So the Alien wasn't like didn't benefit from, we got to make alien stuff. We got to make alien toys. We got to make a movie right away. I mean, that movie kind of came and went, and just kind of, it was creepy, and it kind of had the Jaws thing going for it, where you didn't really see it. So there was that implied horror, and you're kind of scared of the unknown, which is brilliant in horror. That's usually, because your mind can conjure up a lot more frightening things than what you see. So playing with it in that way, and then 86 Aliens comes out, and then it was kind of game on for the Alien as an iconic figure, because then it became like, oh wow, like you got to see them, you got to see a lot of them,
a lot more of them, and then you
got to see what they did, you got to see the Queen, you got to see a lot of it. So
how they're actually conceived and all that kind of thing. So they took it that much further, which was brilliant.
And so he benefited from he meaning the alien. I guess it's a he. he benefited from having like a serious film in the beginning, which had more of those straight up kind of horror or suspense elements, and then 7 years later, he got a sequel, which was like the all-out blasting action, which only James Cameron can do, and put him on the map as well. And then, that just became that image of Alien, and with the Jaws that come out, the second set of Jaws, and just the creepiness, and just the face hugger. I mean, there's so many different aspects to it that, you're well done. Done on your number one.
Dietrich Giger, I was obsessed with his artwork. I had a lot of his art books and stuff, and like there's a documentary on Giger that you can find on streaming platforms. I don't know the name of it, but it's kind of him toward the end of his life. So it's a little sad, but he reflects on his life and his career and stuff. But a lot of that stuff was airbrushed, and he didn't have a compressor. He would take lead paint and blow it through a straw onto the canvas. So the guy was nuts, because he was just inhaling lead 12 hours a day. But he was brilliant. It was the biomechanical stuff that he did. It's sexy, it's gothic, it's dark, it's beautiful, it's erotic. It's like he's just an amazing artist. And when you were talking about the space jockey earlier, just that one scene showing and not explaining it is kind of what was brilliant about Star Wars. It was just, there's history here. We're not going to talk about it, but it makes you realize that you're not just being like channeled or pushed through sets. You're like, something big happened here. We got to figure out what's going on. Yeah.
It's the building of the world.
Yeah.
That Ridley Scott is extremely, I think he actually took what George Lucas started and did it. And he does it in all his films, and that he gets heavily criticized for it, because the world building it kind of takes a front seat to character and to plot a lot of times. But the world that he creates is a character in itself. I mean, in his mind, it's like we have to believe that these characters exist in this world, otherwise it's not going to work. So there's that's where that
it grounds the whole film in that realism of like Andy said, there's a backstory, but we don't have to tell you. You just gotta you can just kind of figure out and think about what it is, or make your own assumptions. But it just kind of enhances the realism of what's going on. And like you said, it's not just like a paper set where it's like a big cave and some styrofoam rocks that are rolling around, that this is thought out, because you can't just make something like that and not have at least in your mind as the director or the writer, have a purpose for it, even if it never gets explained. So well done. Number one, the Xenomorph.
They just one last thing, like the production, the production design on that movie, both movies, just it's H.R. Giger, Sid Mead, give me a break, and Stan Winston, like those three guys coming together to make an unbelievable movie. Yeah,
I think it was, and another thing about Giger is, like, I think it's Dan O'Bannon who wrote the screenplay to the first Alien. When he first met him, he offered him some LSD right out the gate, and he's like, "Why?" He was like, "Why do you take this stuff? Why are you on this stuff?" He goes, "Because I'm afraid of my own designs. He was get panic attacks because he was actually it would give him nightmares. You know, he put this stuff down, and it would traumatize him." Wow. You know, which is, you know,
bizarre, take LSD to come down from the lead.
That's it. All righty. That was Eric's number one, Xenomorph. Andy.
Great pick. Very great.
Ready to uncork and unfurl your number one top horror icon.
I am, and in the true nature of the way we're going, I've got a monster as well.
No.
I would argue it's the monster. My number one in
Count Chocula?
It was Count Chocula from General Mills. No, the mission statement was iconic, and so I went like straight up iconic, like in the true sense of the word. I don't think you're going to find a better definition of iconic for horror than Frankenstein's monster. Mm. And Frankenstein's monster. Nice. I'm not talking about Robert De Niro. I'm not talking about Christopher Lee in The Curse of. I'm not talking about Glenn Strange. I'm talking about Boris Karloff, his face, green skin, sunken cheeks, hooded eyelids, flat head with the bolts in the neck, and the suit jacket too small on his arms. He's iconic, and at least for the last 50 years, anything that's got Halloween monsters on it has a version of him on it, like stickers, toys, notebooks, Hot Wheels, cartoons. You remember the Groovy Ghoulies that from the 70s? The cartoon. Whatever? Yeah. Even the friggin' Power Rangers fought Frankenstein. So it's like the flathead Karloff Frankenstein. So it's like Karloff's monster is the ultimate horror icon, in my opinion, not only aesthetically, but like in the purest form of horror philosophy and religion. You know, it's the whole thing about creation, wondering its place in the universe. Why am I here? Yeah. And the underlying themes of needing to play God, you know, wrapped in German expressionism. It's just a total package. And I think that Karloff's monster is just, it's still, there's certain shots, like there's a shot when he turns around and it's just his face that's slightly out of focus in the movie that is still terrifying. Like he's got this, his eyelids are down. So there's just something horrific about it, you know? And I think Universal in general laid out the iconic looks for all the classic monsters, of course, like the Mummy and everything. But I mean, like the Mummy and like werewolves have already been majorly, you know, explored and established before. I mean, mummies are from Egypt and stuff, and then Universal's Dracula he was pretty iconic, but without, you know, the cape, he's just some like goth dude in a suit, you know? Unless he opens his mouth. But I mean, like the cool thing about Frankenstein is he's a silhouette. Like if a door opens and lightning goes behind him, you see his silhouette. That is Frankenstein. You don't have to see anything on him. But anyway, I'm just iconic in that, like, if you're going to ask a kid, draw a monster, they're going to draw Frankenstein, or draw a version of Frankenstein. You know, it's just, he's iconic. He is horror, in my opinion. And the Universal Karloff Frankenstein is the one for me.
Oh, no doubt.
All right. Well, you know what? Let's just extend the conversation, because Andy has not only skunked me once, shame on me, but skunked me twice. My number one choice was for iconic is also specifically Karloff's Frankenstein as well, not just and you kind of made a couple of salient points, but the Karloff Frankenstein is basically the face that launched 1,000 Don Post costumes for kids. You know, I mean, you know, that was like that's become the image of what Frankenstein is, and it was a little different. You know, Karloff played Frankenstein 3 times and then retired the role as far as him doing it. And Lon Chaney Jr. did it, Bela Lugosi did it, and then Glenn Strange did it. And the main difference between those different actors that did it and Karloff is Karloff's Frankenstein had elements of sympathy, pathos. You felt for him, but you were also horrified for him. And there was shreds of humanity, especially more in Bride of Frankenstein, where he was a little more emotive and was, they had him kind of a little more self-aware and wanting things and being kind of aware. Whereas once they got him out of that and, Lugosi and Glenn Strange and Chaney took over, he was just more of a shuffling monster with his hands out and stiff knees. So, the monster changed into just this thing that just kind of this image that just kind of shuffles around. But the Karloff ones were really impactful, especially, we're talking 90 years ago that this that Frankenstein came out. Actually, November of 1931. So we're about a month away from 90 years of this image. And just think about how long ago that was, and just think about how it has endured, and it is not cheesy, and it is not, the stuff that passed through time, like the 60s, Christopher Lee, that is looked on as being cheesy, but then the stuff that's even further back was looked at as, the stuff that Jack Pierce was doing was absolutely genius. He was a horror to work with, from what I understand. But the stuff he was doing, it endures. Like, people don't look at that one and say, you could see this, you could see that. It still holds up, and that's why it's so iconic. Is that it has endured through all these different decades and genres, and changing film tastes, changing film technology, changing the way films are made, the digital age, and that thing from 90 years ago still stands the test of time. And that's what's amazing about it for me, is that's what makes it so iconic.
I think the original story, I mean, the creature itself, but it set the template for, even the alien. I mean, it's this notion of building this perfect being, right? Victor Frankenstein wants to create this, by using different organs and body parts, and he wants to create his own being, play God. We've seen this theme reoccur in not only horror, but sci-fi, and even in with AI, like robots, that kind of thing. And if it's not that, it's probably Pinocchio or the two stories that you could probably say are wanting to be a real boy, and then this thing wanting to be like just a perfect organism, the perfect being, and trying to out perfect humanity in that sense. They even revisited the Alien franchise by Ridley Scott wanting to do that as well, with Prometheus wanting to explore that thing in the chair as a creator of things, and this humanity is such a mistake that we need to create something to wipe it out. In this case, in Frankenstein, it has the notion of, I want to create something, I can do this, I can play God.
Yeah, that's the whole notion right there, is playing God, is creating something, and it doesn't always go. It never goes well. I've never seen a story where it did go well.
No, absolutely not.
It's not just the monster too that's iconic. I mean, just screaming, "It's alive!" I mean, that's 90 years old, and people still say that. And and even the Tesla coils, like the machinery. I mean,
they still use that, like when they do a mad scientist lab. I'm sure, Andy, you probably have used it in your art. If you made a mad scientist laboratory, you have the test tubes and the beakers, and then those electrical coils, right?
There's just to know what's actually in those beakers when they press a button, they pull a lever or something, and everything just starts to boil. Like, what is
the beakers start bubbling? Everything starts bubbling and smoke.
But what purpose does the bubbling liquid serve?
Dramatic effects.
It's carbonated, so it goes down smoother when you drink it.
It heightens the tension when you see bubbling beakers and smoke.
There's just. I loved that whole. There's two kind of camps for horror movies, and I was always more of a monster kid growing up. And there's horror fans that are splatter fans, which I don't like the gore splatter stuff. I can handle it in short bits, but I don't want to just watch somebody get ripped apart, whatever. I was more of a monster kid, and I loved. There was a renaissance around the 50s, late 50s, early 60s, kind of into the 70s, really, of monster kids, with famous Monsters of Filmland, a magazine starting to get popular, and a lot of the toys were coming back out. And then the Glenn Strange Frankenstein was kind of showing up a lot too. But then we had the Ben Cooper costumes, remember the from the basically wearing a shower curtain with the mask, with something on it. It's so there was a renaissance of monster stuff that came back in the 50s, early 60s, and I love all those old toys and stuff. I would love to collect that stuff if I ever got the opportunity. But Universal owns the copyright to the flathead bolts in the neck Frankenstein. So like when De Niro did it, or Frankenstein 2020 or what, I don't even know what's going on right now, but like they don't do the iconic Frankenstein because they can't. But they have so many different versions of it. What do you guys think? Do you think that any of them were ever cool, like are cool looking, other than the Frankenstein, the Universal?
No.
You're kind of trying to run against the wind with something like that, right?
Yeah.
Because you've got something that is just, again, 90 years old, so and it endures, so it's something that's always there. It's like this beacon that is always going to be there. And they've tried to reinvent him, stitching and making.
You're always going to make that comparison. There's just no doubt.
It's a tough nut to crack. And I think, and some of the movies have tried to make it more realistic, where he wouldn't look like that. I think that's where the De Niro, where Kenneth Branagh's Frankenstein went, is it's more like a dude who's just sewn together and has his full intellect and all that kind of stuff. But no, I don't think you can. And then there was that I, Frankenstein with Thomas Jane, where they tried to kind of have some element,
where he's like a superhero, or like
you just got what? At some point, you just gotta leave it alone. You don't need to.
Yeah,
I don't think that one like the Mummy franchise. That was a great reboot by Universal with Brendan Fraser. That was like made for the Indiana Jones crowd, and I don't know that you could do Frankenstein again. And why would you want to?
Yeah.
Right.
It's kind of been, it's there. That stuff, like I said, that, you do Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein, and you've got a 1-2 punch of some really great filmmaking and dark comedy, more so in Bride of Frankenstein. I mean, it was really kind of nudging the audience a little bit with the subject matter, but great choice. That was a great choice for me, and it was a great choice for Andy as well. So
great choice.
That did it for our top 3. But as we wind down, Andy had made a couple of comments, and I want to circle back on them, where he had mentioned about metal, heavy metal, and horror films, and they're kind of almost like a natural 1-2, right? They kind of go together. Guys that are usually into metal are usually into horror, and that leads us into. I wanted Andy to elaborate a little bit about Spooky Empire, which is a really big horror convention twice a year down in the Florida area. And Andy has done a lot of artwork for them. One of the ones that I like the best, which was one of the recent ones, is Andy's work for Spooky Empire. It really literally mashes up heavy metal and horror icons. And one of the first ones I saw that he did was a takeoff on the Kiss Unmasked album, where they were unmasking, and it was the Universal monsters. And he's done some other Kiss ones, but I think it was last year or the year before, you had done an Iron Maiden album cover.
Yeah.
Where on the Iron Maiden album cover, Eddie is coming out of the grave, but in this case, it's the Karloff Frankenstein, which was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, it was the first the first convention back from the pandemic. So it was the whole, because it's from the Maiden album Live After Death, and it's kind of the resurrection theme, coming out of the grave. And there was a time when we didn't know if conventions would ever come back. I mean, the first. The Spooky Empire is twice. I'll get into Spooky in just a second, but it's twice a year. And the pandemic shut down in March, and there was one due for April. So that's devastating when you're doing a convention, and because MegaCon got shut down, Comic-Con got shut down and stuff like that. So nobody knew anything was coming back. So to celebrate coming back and being able to do conventions again, it was that thing where it's like, what would be a cool thing? But Spooky Empire, it's been really cool doing artwork for them. It's the largest horror convention in the southeast of America, and it happens twice a year, and I get to do a lot of artwork for it. And the showrunner, Pete Mongelli, and I are kind of kindred spirits, that we're both metal fans and horror fans, and the shows always have both horror and metal guests at the shows, and the merchandise is always some clever mashup of the two. So we'll take some of the guests that'll be there, like the Unmasked one. It was for it was Freddie, Jason, Mike Myers, and Leatherface. All the actors, Robert Englund, all those guys were going to be at the show. So we put them on the thing, and how can we make this, fun and playful and stuff. But it's unlike any convention I've ever been to, and it's because it's really intimate, and because I've been to MegaCon and you're like 200 yards away from everybody else. And the reason I love this convention is because it's really intimate. And like the very first one I ever went to the VIP party on that Saturday night, and Robert Englund was there, and he cut the cake. It was a Freddy shaped cake. He cut the cake with his screen used glove and gave out cake to everybody. You know, I was a huge, I'm a big Freddy fan, so I always lost it. And I just invite anybody who's a fan of horror, come check it out. I'm not making any money by selling anything to you. I'm just I love it. It's just a great time. I had like karaoke at the VIP party one year, and Joey from Anthrax sang "Don't Stop Believing" from Journey, and like Lance Guest, the guy who played the last Starfighter and was in Jaws 4 or whatever, sang a Johnny Cash song. And one year Bruce Campbell was there. He cut the cake with the chainsaw. So it's like, nice. It's Mecca for horror fans. It's like you're stuck in this gigantic room with an open bar, and the guests are getting drunk, and
you had me at open bar.
Yeah. And, everybody gets really nutty. We've met quite a few people like, Freddy Krueger, Malcolm McDowell, Kiss, Stranger Things, X-Files, all those guys are there. And it's a great time. There's, one coming up and they're announcing all the stuff, all the artwork that's coming out pretty soon. And then it's at the convention, or no, it's a really big hotel in downtown Orlando this year. And I can't wait to see it because apparently the unmasked artwork that you talked about is going to be the entire backdrop of the stage. Like the fans are playing, like, 40 feet wide and stuff like that. So it's going to be
cool. That's got to be neat. Yeah, definitely check it out, or if nothing else, check out the art that Andy has done for it too. Really, like I said, I like that when it's done smartly, and he's a great artist. So when you look at the Maiden one, it's got the same color, the same color scheme, the palette. So you really think for a second you're looking at the Iron Maiden album cover, but then you look and it's the Karloff Frankenstein coming out of the grave. So really well done. Kudos, Andy.
Derek Riggs, the original Maiden artist, is like the godfather of heavy metal art. Like all the Iron Maiden album covers, he's going to be at Spooky this time. I get to meet him for the first time. I'm like, nice. Going to be gaga over, because I used to stare at the gatefolds of those like Somewhere in Time albums, and just all the little details and stuff. Yeah, good stuff, man.
Awesome. All righty. Well, fantastic. that was our top 3 horror icons. Hope everybody enjoyed that. Again, we're gonna wrap up here. So thanks for joining us on our second Spooktober Halloween celebration episode. Andy will be back again later in the month with one of his favorite films that we're going to talk about. We'll save that. But in the meantime, you can check us out social media, 3324 Podcast on Instagram and on Facebook. On Twitter, we're at 3324P. We've got new episodes every Thursday. And then we've got quick hits for the people that have a short attention span and don't really want to listen to us jabber on for an hour. You don't have to. You can listen to one of us talk for 6 minutes or so and get a smaller bite. So check those out too. Those are weekly. And for Andy, check him out on Andrew Cremeen's art on Instagram. And for Eric, this has been Dean asking you to please be kind and rewind.
You've been listening to the 3324 Podcast with Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber. You can find us on your favorite podcast provider, so please like, subscribe, and rate to become a part of the 3324 family. Your feedback is important, so make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at 3324 Podcast and on Twitter at 3324P to join the conversation.